Regardless of the evidence there is supporting soft tissue work, self-myofascial release, trigger point work, foam rolling, etc., we find that people feel better when they do these things, and it often opens up a window of range of motion around joints and the tissue that influences that joint for a time being. However, it's important to identify and to be objective about the function you're trying to achieve and how you can reinforce that function with fitness and the activities that you like to participate in. So foam rolling, trigger point work, whatever you want to call it, may be one method to open up that window, but you have to decide whether or not that's the best use of your time. So sometimes we use these strategies in the beginning of a workout for movement prep. We use them as active rest in between sets, or you can use them as a recovery tool in between sessions. It's probably more of a neurological input, and again, it's opening up a window, and it's really important that we reinforce that with functional patterns that we're trying to achieve that support our activities and goals. Because ultimately that window might close down if we're not reinforcing it with the activity that we want to participate in. When you foam roll or do trigger point work on your own, you're probably not creating real tissue change, but what you are doing is you're stimulating your nervous system. And you can really go down the rabbit hole with these devices. There's different sizes, different densities, harder, softer, some of them vibrate, they heat up. Case in point with this Hyperice Hypersphere, essentially a trigger point ball that also vibrates, giving your nervous system some type of input, potentially opening up a window of opportunity. When we use these things, we want to see change immediately. If we don't, we need to use some type of other method and reconsider our plan. Before you start, it's important to determine why you're doing this. Use some type of assessment process to determine what you're trying to do, what should your body be capable of, and where do you stand in relation to that. So with foam rolling and trigger point work, we could use this as a movement prep protocol to open up some windows of opportunity to then go train through the range of motion that we need. You could use it as a recovery tool in between sets, in between sessions, to make your muscles feel better, promote blood flow, circulation, potentially promote recovery. So a strategy you could use beyond your typical foam rolling is we could pin and stretch these tissues by moving the joint through a range of motion while we're pinning the tissue down on one of the devices. In the case of the ankles, we want to restore that triplanar motion, so I could go clockwise, counterclockwise circles. I could dorsiflex, planar flex, invert, evert. Another big mobility rock are our hips and the glutes and tissue that influence that hip. So I could place the trigger point ball on that tissue, and then I'm going to move the joint through a range of motion while I pin down the tissue, flexion and extension. Could also do external and internal rotation. Moving on to more of the anterior lower body, we can take a look at the hip flexors and the knee extensors. So we get into a lot of that quad tissue on the front of our leg or our thigh. We want to work the entire belly of the muscles in all of these, but essentially we're going to find a tender spot, and then we're going to pin and stretch by drawing the heel to the glutes. Particularly the rectus femoris is both a hip flexor and a knee extensor. Big influencers around the upper body, particularly the shoulder girdle, are going to be the pecs and the lats, driving you into internal rotation and adduction. So we could use the pin and stretch technique by placing the ball in those tissues and then trying to restore some of the overhead positions that we might want to get into, adding some external rotation, adding some abduction. On the other side, more of a posterior lateral side, placing the ball right around that joint. We have the lats, again, driving into external rotation, and then encouraging that overhead position and abduction.